All right, today we're going to be learning about different types of properties, and we have seen a lot of these properties already, but it's just something that we need to know in different ways we can utilize math and ways we can see equivalent fractions. So the first thing we're going to talk about is distributive, and that's going to be over here next to the word priorities with the S. So go ahead and turn your paper so we can work on that one. So distributive property is when you multiply the number on the outside by each item on the inside of the parentheses. Then you add the products, which means you add the answers together. So in this example, we have 5 on the outside touching the parentheses, which means to multiply, and you have 30 plus 3. So instead of doing 30 plus 3 first and then having to multiply bigger numbers that aren't as familiar to us, we're going to use the distributive property and distribute that 5 inside with multiplication. So I would go 5 times 30. I know that 5 times 3 is 15. And if I add a 0 to that, that's 150. So 150 goes first. And then we're going to distribute that 5 to the 3. So 5 times 3 is 15. Then I'm going to add the products or add the numbers together. So that gives me 150 plus 15 is 165. So here's a little non-number one that kind of helps you see where the numbers go. A on the outside, parentheses, B plus C inside the parentheses, and we're setting that equal to A plus B, or A times B plus A times C. So remember, if they're touching, they're multiplying. This is something you will use through math in high school, and it is something that is very common to see. The next one we're going to move to is the associative property. That's going to be right to the left, so just twist it to the left a little bit. Now, the associative property is when you have groups of numbers, so add-ins or factors, so those are just numbers that can change, but the sum or the product can stay the same. So these groups, what they mean is when they're in parentheses. So the parentheses just literally move. So the first one we have is with finding the sum. We have in parentheses 3 plus 4 plus 5. We're setting that equal to 3. All they did was move the parentheses because that would be 4 plus 5. 3, and then the parentheses are now around the 4 plus 5. So if we go back over to the first piece, 3 plus 4 is 7, and 5 would stay the same. On the other side of the equal sign, 3 would stay there, and 4 plus 5 would give me 9. Even though these are different numbers, when we add them together, they're both going to equal 12. That's what the associative property is. Same thing for multiplication. If everything is multiplying, you can just move your parentheses and your answer will still be the same. 3 times 4 times 5 equals 3, and in parentheses would be the 4 and the 5, just like in the last one. 3 times 4 is 12. 5 would stay the same. 3 would stay the same on the other side of the equal sign, and then 4 times 5 is 20. When you did the math on these, you would get 60 and 60. So with associative property, remember, all they're wanting you to know is that you can move the parentheses and your answer will be the same. There was a question on your benchmark like this, and they often ask which expression is equivalent. And all they do is change where the parentheses are. So pay close attention to those type of questions. That's an easy question in your corner during a STAR test. The next thing we're going to go to is commutative property, and this is something that you have known for a very long time. You might just not know the name. So again, that's right to the left. So commutative property is where you put the order of the numbers differently. So the order of the numbers can change, but the sum or product stays the same. So this is something you've seen for a while. You know that 3 plus 2 is going to be the same as 2 plus 3. They're both going to equal 5. You also know that 3 times 2 is the same as 2 times 3. They're both going to equal 6. That's all the commutative property is. So here's a letter version. A plus B equals B plus A. It doesn't matter where you put the numbers. It's going to be the same. And then A times B equals B times A, just like we showed you with the numbers. All right, this next property you have probably known for a very long time, and we're going to move again to the left. It's the identity property of addition. So This property is pretty straightforward. The sum of any number and 0 is just that number. So you know that 5 plus 0 is 5. And x plus 0 would just be x. So x is just a variable that we use when we don't know a number. But I know if I added 0 to it, it would just be the same number. So identity is where we know that it's always going to be that number when it's added to 0. The next one, moving to our last one, is the identity of multiplication property. So this one is one that's very common for you too. It says the product of any number and 1 is just that number. So we've known that. 5 times 1 is just 5. And then x times 1 would just be x because it is not increasing in value. One of the things to know is that next to every x, there is always an invisible 1. And if you look on my invisible wall, it is back there to describe it as well. So these are all of the properties of multiplication and addition that we focus on in 6th grade. So the big ones that I want you to remember is the associative and the associative and distributive properties. Those are the ones that they usually ask about and question on when you are doing STAR type testing.